All right, everyone. Thank you all for standing by and welcome to our webinar entitled Fish Farming, Food Systems, and Recreation Aquaculture in Ohio. This webinar series called Freshwater Science will highlight Ohio Sea Grant and partnering scientists every month. Every quarter is a different focus, from human health and fish farming to harmful algal blooms and human decision making, bringing applied research to the public on issues that affect our Lake Erie communities. I am Jill Gentis Banicki from Ohio Sea Grant and Stone Laboratory, and joining me today is Nicole Wright from Ohio Sea Grant. As an aquaculture extension educator, Nicole connects researchers, Ohio State University Extension aquaculture specialists, and industry professionals while assisting to build Sea Grant's Great Lakes Aquaculture Collaborative. She also manages the daily needs of the Lake Erie and Aquatic Research Network, a regional research consortium of field stations and diverse researchers to address the challenges facing Lake Erie. We're really delighted to have Nicole here to talk to us about Ohio aquaculture. Before we do anything more, let me just tell you a few things about the logistics of this webinar. During our presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Afterwards, around 12:20 or so, I'll conduct a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please feel free to pull up that chat feature at the bottom of your screen anytime during her talk, and I will collect and pose your questions out to Nicole at the end of her presentation. As a reminder, this webinar has auto captioning and is being recorded to be posted onto our website for later viewing. Also, we will post a webinar survey in the chat feature toward the end of the half an hour. Please take a few minutes after the webinar to fill out that survey. It will help us continue to bring you great webinars. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Nicole Wright, presenting Fish Farming, Food Systems, and Recreation Aquaculture in Ohio. Nicole.
Yes, thank you, Jill.
Sure.
First, I want to start off by saying that we don't have a lot of time today. So I'm going to present a lot of information in a short amount of time. And my goal is to expand what you already know about aquaculture and get you thinking about it maybe differently than you have previously. So first, I want to kind of touch on ways that you might not be aware that you are already interacting with aquaculture in your life. So some questions for you. Are you someone who has fished for steelhead trout in a river or tributary in Ohio? Or maybe caught a yellow perch in Ohio Reservoir? Have you eaten oysters in Maine or an Atlantic salmon? Have you had goldfish in an aquarium or koi in a garden pond? Or have you stocked your pond with fish? If you said yes to any of these, you have been involved with aquaculture. Whether it's for recreation or for food, each of these were raised by a federal or state hatchery or farmer in the US. So what exactly is aquaculture? A textbook definition here from NOAA Fisheries is that aquaculture is the breeding, rearing, and harvesting of animals and plants in all types of water environments. So that can be freshwater or marine environments, in controlled conditions, and production for multiple purposes, both food and non-food. So at its most basic, aquaculture is farming in water. The word breaks down to water and culture, culture being the base also of agriculture, of course, which is producing a crop. So here in Ohio, we also often call it fish farming or fish culture because we are mostly growing finfish rather than other types of seafood, although you'll see later that we are growing other types of seafood. So aquaculture is a number of things. First off, it is agriculture. This means it includes domesticated fish like common carp, Atlantic salmon, goldfish, and koi, but also many, many undomesticated species. a diverse range of species, largely undomesticated, and each with its own biological needs. We are cultivating crops for food, recreation, which includes stocking ponds, fee fishing operations, and bait, for ornamentals, such as garden ponds and aquariums, and also for conservation of species or restoration of habitat. And lastly, sustainable aquaculture can be done. It can be done responsibly and in an environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable way. So, some things that we know about aquaculture most recently is that here in 2024, the FAO released their 2022 report on aquaculture and fisheries. And for the first time, we see that aquaculture production is surpassing wild harvest of seafood species. So overall, what do we produce in aquaculture? We have a lot of finfish production, both marine and freshwater. We have crustaceans such as freshwater prawns and saltwater shrimp. Many bivalves, mollusks such as clams, mussels, oysters, and scallops. Aquatic plants that are used in wetlands, garden ponds, and aquariums. Macroalgae such as seaweed and a whole variety of microalgae that are now being researched for biofuel and nutritional supplements. And we also have eels. So you can see this is not an exhaustive list of what aquaculture produces, but it gives you a look at the range. And here you can kind of see a breakdown of inland versus marine environments and different types of products and what proportion of aquaculture production they're taking up. So a very, very brief history of aquaculture. Aquaculture has its origins thousands of years ago in ancient China, Egypt, Rome, Hawaii, and other places around the world. In China, you can see that they were doing integrated fish and rice production. In Hawaii, seaside fish ponds were the norm. In Rome, also seaside ponds and pools. And in Egypt, Nile tilapia in ponds. So we can see that long ago, people were culturing fish mostly for subsistence. In the US, however, aquaculture is rather new. So aquaculture in the US is really looking at the mid-19th century as its origin. And the reason was more for recreational purposes, for sport fish enhancement. This was being done at federal and state hatcheries. And the industry really got established in the 1950s when the catfish industry in the South really took off. And similar to other types of agriculture, the formulation of dry pelleted manufactured fish feed really spurred the growth. So here in Ohio, we have a tie to the origins of aquaculture in the 1850s. Two physicians from Cleveland, Ohio are credited as being the first to artificially fertilize trout eggs using glass incubation jars in 1853. What this meant was that now we were cultivating a fish species from egg to harvest completely in controlled conditions. So what does aquaculture look like in Ohio? On the left is a map that the markers indicate about 115 aquaculture permits for aquaculture businesses in the state of Ohio. These are from, the permits are issued by the Department of Natural Resources. The census of aquaculture, similar to the census of agriculture, is a survey done by USDA every 5 years. The last one that we have the numbers on is from 2018. There'll be new numbers coming out this December from the most recent census. But what we know from the census, and also we realize that not everybody completes a survey. So this is just sort of a snapshot in time of those reporting. There were 59 aquaculture farms reported in Ohio in 2018. totaling $6.7 million in aquaculture products sold and covering almost 1,400 acres in aquaculture farms. All of those farms are inland. Most of them are outdoor ponds. Some of them are indoor or outdoor raceways. Some are recirculating aquaculture systems. And finally, others are aquaponics systems. I do want to note that there's no aquaculture that is being practiced in Lake Erie. So now we can compare overall Ohio aquaculture to Ohio agriculture, and we see that it is a very small portion of agriculture that's happening in the state. It's a small sector. That doesn't mean that it's insignificant. So when we look at aquaculture products from Ohio, again from the census, we see that food fish are predominant types of species being grown, followed by sport fish, bait fish, and ornamental fish. But I do want to note that the way the aquaculture census defines food fish, it includes species such as catfish, yellow perch, tilapia, and trout, which we are commonly stocking here in Ohio. So they serve a dual purpose. So again, when it comes to production systems, we're mostly looking at outdoor pond systems. These can range in size from a 1/4 acre to an acre to multiple acres. Secondly, we see that we have RAS production, which is recirculating aquaculture systems. This is where a lot of our tilapia is being grown, among other species. And finally, we have aquaponics, which again, we probably have a handful of producers or less. And aquaponics is the integration of growing plants and fish in the same system. So what kinds of species are we growing? Here we see the numbers again from the census, the species that are being grown and the number of farms that reported producing that fish. So for food fish in Ohio, the #1 species being grown is tilapia. That's being again grown indoors in recirculating aquaculture systems. That fish is going into ethnic markets in some of our metropolitan areas. It's also being used to stock ponds for algae control. Secondly, we have yellow perch, a very popular fish here in Ohio for recreational fishing and for eating. But again, most of these fish are actually being grown to stock ponds. What we know from producers is that food fish markets are not as profitable as fish and pond stocking markets. Thirdly, we have carp, then catfish and trout as the top species being grown. Sport fish, same thing. Here we have smallmouth bass and sunfish is a very popular species that are being grown for sport fish, followed by largemouth bass, crappie, other types of fish, and walleye. So what I really like is to show you what some different farms actually look like. I think that most people in Ohio don't realize that they've driven by a fish farm or don't know that what they're seeing is a fish farm. So I'd like to show some images, and I wish that, I could take you on an actual tour of these farms. But you can see some virtual tours on our website, so I can direct you to those later. So first we have freshwater farms of Ohio in Urbana. These are rainbow trout that are being grown in large outdoor tanks. This is also what's considered an agritourism site. So they welcome people to come to the farm, see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And there's also a sturgeon petting zoo, along with an indoor store where they sell their trout in smoked form, patties, fillets, and so forth. This is an image from Jones Lake Management, one of our largest lake and pond management companies in the state. They purchase a lot of fish from some of our smaller businesses that are growing for pond stocking. This is an image from Root House Aquaponics, They are an aquaponics producing facility in the Cincinnati area in Southwest Ohio. They grow a lot of greens, some herbs and some flowers, and they're growing tilapia that they're selling to farmers markets, to restaurants, and to Jungle Jim's market down there. Again, whole live fish. This is Mill Creek Perch Farm. They grow their perch from egg to harvest. So this is a process of them sorting the fish in tanks that at the early part of the year, they are hatching eggs in. By the end of the year, they're pulling fish in from the ponds, counting and sorting them for distribution. This is another image of Mill Creek Farm with some other folks from Brems Farm and other places helping them seine the ponds. This is an image again from Jones Lake Management of pond seining. So a lot of Ohio aquaculture production is very hands-on, hard work, heavy lifting of nets and fish. This, unfortunately, is a farm that is no longer in existence, but I wanted to put this here. This was a tilapia farm named Ripple Rock in Frazeysburg. But you can see from the outside, you would never know that inside there were tanks of tilapia being grown inside. This is another tilapia growing farm called Freedom Fish Farms. Most tilapia, or all of our tilapia growers, import their fry from other states and then grow the fish to harvest size. This is a saltwater shrimp being grown at Ocean Arc Technologies in Pataskala, Ohio. It's one of, again, a handful of saltwater shrimp facilities in the state. We also have some freshwater prawn production as well. This is Ohio Koi in the Delaware, Ohio area. They specialize in both domestic and Japanese koi, along with aquatic plants. And this is Castalia Fish Hatchery, one of our state-run by the Department of Natural Resources fish hatcheries, where they grow both steelhead and rainbow trout for stocking into Ohio's public waters. So finally, one other type of aquaculture that we don't often talk about or think about is conservation aquaculture. And some of that is also happening in Ohio. So these two examples, one, we have lake sturgeon being reared by the Toledo Zoo in partnership with our Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And the purpose of this program is to release these sturgeon in the Maumee River to build up populations in the river and Lake Erie. Every year, the last few years, they do something called Sturgeon Fest, where you can take a sturgeon and put it into the water. So you're helping them with their job there. That was just a couple of weeks ago. And then the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium's Waters Aquatic Conservation Center is a partnership, again, with the DNR, but also with OSU. And this facility is really all about the study and preservation of freshwater mussels that we have here in Ohio. There's a whole large variety of mussels that grow here in Ohio in our rivers. And this program is doing a whole host of different types of research, from looking at host relationships with fish and also in vitro propagation and breeding. So why does any of this matter? Why even talk about aquaculture? So first of all, we can think about our local or domestic seafood supply. What we know is that the US is in a seafood deficit, meaning that we import far more seafood than we export. There's a clear demand for seafood, and as our population grows, that is only increasing. Recreational fishing inputs and pond health is a very important sector here in Ohio. Recreational fishing is a multi-billion-dollar industry in Ohio. So the fish that are being stocked are very important to anglers. And also for people that have ponds in their backyards and their developments and so forth, stocking fish into those ponds is important for maintaining pond health. Again, thinking about conservation of species and restoration of habitat, provided a couple of examples from Ohio, but that's again not an exhaustive list. There are other species being raised for these purposes, and they're helping to either maintain populations or reintroduce populations to where they were once native. Aquaculture also means small business development, local jobs, and local economies. Here in Ohio, most of our farms are small to mid-sized. They're family run, and often the person that is running that farm is not doing this as a full-time job. Most of these are smaller establishments. There are some larger ones that have many employees, but that's not really the norm. So then when we think about farming fish or other seafood products in Ohio, there's definitely room to grow and demand for both fish as food and for non-food aquaculture products. And I really want to note here that when we talk about aquaculture, just like other types of agriculture, farmers care about what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I haven't touched on a number of things on aquaculture, but we can answer some questions later. So I'm not saying that aquaculture is the end all be all, but it is a very important part of our ecosystem. And then there's sustainability. Indoor aquaculture especially is a very efficient use of water, which we know in all areas of the country when we have these drought conditions is a large issue. There's also advances in fish feed proteins. So there are novel proteins that are being developed anywhere from insect meals to animal byproducts to microalgae. Of course, we also have different types of grains. So we have soybeans as being a large replacement for what traditionally was fish meal and fish oil in our fish foods, but even that is advancing. There's a lot of research on what the optimum percentage of inclusion is in these fish feeds. There are also secondary products that are being developed from waste streams. So from recirculating aquaculture systems or aquaponics, there are some solids along with liquid discharge. Some of these solids can be used as compost. There's others that are looking at microalgae production to both help treat the water in the system and then go on to be used for biofuels or other nutritional compounds. And then by advancing aquaculture, we're also advancing a technically and scientifically trained workforce. As I mentioned before, there are so many species being raised, dozens of species just here in Ohio. What that means is that a farmer needs to understand the biological needs of that fish, understand the mechanics of their system, whether it's indoors or outdoors, filtration, aeration, and so forth. And it does provide opportunity in schools too for students to learn about how all of these pieces come together. So finally, I just want to leave you with some resources so you can look further into this afterwards. One thing, the Great Lakes Aquaculture Collaborative is a group of SEGRAT programs in the Great Lakes region who are working together to advance aquaculture through research, extension, and education. On our website, we have a lot of great resources, including some FAQs about aquaculture, links to webinars and virtual farm tours, and some of our research briefs. Related to that, the same group developed the Great Lakes Fresh Fish Finder, an online tool that you can use to find fish that are wild caught or aquacultured, all types of different products in the region. Finally, to learn more about regulation, These are our two main regulators for aquaculture in Ohio, related to permitting, facilities, transport, and water withdrawal, for Division of Natural Resources. And then for Department of Agriculture, they're involved in fish health inspection and testing, and obviously with food safety. Other regulators would be EPA and Department of Health. Another resource is our regional aquaculture centers. These are USDA-supported centers supporting cooperative and collaborative research and extension programs, mostly through grant dollars that they use to address practical issues within each region of the state. They provide a lot of different resources and fact sheets on their websites, along with their research reports. And also, the aquaculture industry has associations that they form to help support themselves. We have the Ohio Aquaculture Association here in the state, and then also the National Aquaculture Association. These are member-based organizations that act as a voice for industry through education and advocacy. So finally, this is my contact information. I'm happy to answer questions now, and also if you want to follow up with me to talk about different topics in depth. And I'm also pointing you to a recent event that we did this summer with an article and a video with some producer perspectives of aquaculture in Ohio. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicole. That was great. So we've gotten several questions, so I would like to just start off and see how many we can get through here. The first question is one dealing with it's a more of a clarification question, and from like early on in your presentation, someone was asking what the difference between inland versus coastal is.
So inland means that it's going to be in some kind of man-made building or pond. It could be in marine environments. We're really looking at using those coastal environments, in estuaries, and then there's also a small amount of open net pen farming in the oceans. So it just means that we're not doing it in the Great Lakes themselves. We're doing it in kind of man-made structures.
All right. Another question that we had was, you had mentioned that there isn't aquaculture in Lake Erie. Is there aquaculture in the other Great Lakes?
So there is a little bit of aquaculture in Lake Huron on the Canadian side. It is very contentious here in the United States, a conversation that has been had, especially in Michigan. I think that in the US, it seems that the highest and best use of our Great Lakes is for recreational purposes overall, especially Lake Erie. Each lake is very different in their biological makeup, but it just hasn't been seen as the best use of those waters.
All right. Would you be able to talk a little bit about, we had a couple people ask, how much fish, how many pounds of fish, come from Ohio aquaculture right now, and how much you're seeing it increase over like the last couple of years?
So I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of number of pounds, but in terms of it increasing or decreasing, in Ohio, what we saw is that in the early 2000s, the number of farms was increasing. Since the 2010s, we've really plateaued. Now, when we look at aquaculture overall in the US, there's actually fewer farms than there used to be, but like other types of farming, some of those farms are getting larger. And then the balance of freshwater and saltwater nationally is about 50-50 at this point.
Okay. How would you say Ohio compares with the other Midwestern states in terms of the amount of aquaculture?
We actually have one of the larger industries in the Great Lakes states. So that's in both number of farms and either pounds or number of fish that are being sold. So we are one of the larger producers for different types of fish. And each fish, certain states have different specialties. So for example, Pennsylvania is known for their trout, whereas we have quite a wide variety of fish here.
What would you say is your and Sea Grant's greatest role in working with and supporting aquaculture and farmers in Ohio?
Um, I would say advancing sustainable aquaculture practices. So whether that's, peer-to-peer learning with farmers, whether that's developing research projects that can answer questions that are affecting the industry. Our role really is to either get some of that research going, but ultimately to disseminate those results in practical ways that people can use. So our goal is not to create 100 fish farms in 3 years. It's really to make sure that people understand what it means to get into this business, what it takes to stay in this business.
Okay. And going with that, we had a couple people ask if someone was interested in starting an aquaculture pond or one of the one of the ways of aquaculture, how would they get started?
It's sort of a big question, but the first thing is really to ask why. Why do you want to do this? And really have a good answer for that. And developing a business plan to go along with that. So really looking at all of what most people would maybe consider the boring parts first to make sure you understand your markets, understand the needs of what it is you want to grow, to understand the economics of what it is that you want to grow, whether that's land, machinery, people, etc.
Okay.
So reaching out to Sea Grant Extension or Land Grant Extension if you have an aquaculture extension person like we do here in Ohio, also with our land grant extension. So we can kind of be the first people to point you to those good resources so you can accomplish those things.
And are there like any grants for like startup of a fish farm in Ohio?
This is always a big question in agriculture generally. Overall, there's not a lot of grant funding to start farms. Um, there's more there's more loan assistance programs. There is a grant program called SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. We have a North Central SARE. They have grants that farmers can apply for themselves to do research on their farms, but it's not necessarily something to start your farm. It's to innovate something that you're already doing.
Okay. Um, we had a question asking if you were interested in doing something like this, what kind of degree would you need to get into aquaculture?
Well, that's a great question. I would say a lot of our farmers did not come from a fisheries background. Maybe some of them did. A lot of them come from engineering or mechanical backgrounds, more technology based. So really, I think there are some programs and obviously sustainable fisheries and aquaculture at different universities, for example, at Auburn, but those degrees aren't necessary. So I think a passion and an understanding of fish biology, and environment, and also then looking at the business side. So depending on where you want to be in the business, do you want to be the owner? Do you want to be working on the farm? Overall, it's going to take a lot of hands-on physical labor, no matter what facility or type of fish you're growing.
Okay. If someone was interested, would you have like recommendations of like people that they could possibly talk to get kind of more information, more insight on
Sure.
how to?
Yeah, there's anything from in Wisconsin, there's the um, National Aquaculture Demonstration Facility at Stevens Point. They have a lot of internship programs and other things that they get students involved in up there to getting connected with a number of professors in the field. Sure.
Okay. I have two more questions if you're okay with going a little longer. Um, One is, um, and this goes back to like some of the very beginning of your discussion. Um, Someone asked what happens to the fish waste at these farms?
So in ponds, a lot of that is just being biologically, just like in any system, there's almost you can kind of consider it composting happening at the bottom of the fish pond. So there's different organisms in there that are breaking down the fish waste. In indoor facilities, there's biofilters and then solids filters. So there's, again, different bacterial and fungal communities that are filtering the water as well as the solid waste removal. And that solid waste, both of those, people can have retaining ponds, people can have constructed wetlands. That's most often where it's going.
Okay. The last question I have is, what are maybe a few things that you are doing in the aquaculture area that are maybe some new projects that you are have started up or partnerships that you are working in, just kind of like the things that you are doing right now?
So right now, one big project is with Purdue. It's a project called Blue is Green. It's a large aquaponics project. So I'll be working on the extension component of that. So again, relaying their research results in ways that people can use. There are multiple components to that. So I've been connecting them with some of our aquaponics extension and producers. A lot of my work is with the Great Lakes Aquaculture Collaborative. We've just been funded for a new cycle coming up where we are expanding what we're doing with K-12 educators, working on working more with regulators and legislators. And again, that's mostly helping them understand the industries in their own state, connecting them with producers and so forth. And then also looking at what don't we know? There's not a lot of data on aquaculture production and actually in seafood production in the Great Lakes. So of course we have some numbers, but when we look at the supply chain, there's a lot of unknowns. And so we're really looking at how to kind of verbalize what some of those are and eventually fill some of those gaps.
All right. One person had asked when you were talking about the curriculum, would there be a way that that the agenda would be out there for the course, the curriculum, so they could possibly get some CEUs?
For a particular course, you mean?
Yeah,
Or
the what you were mentioning about curriculum. Is it something that could be used for CEUs, or is it more for um
um, I don't know the answer to that. So there are curricula that classroom teachers can use that I could point people to. Um, there are some trainings that some colleagues have done that they perhaps have been able to do CEUs. So when we, upcoming, if we're going to be doing trainers with educators, I'm sure that we'll be finding ways to provide CEUs for those. There are other trainings that other like actual producers want to attend. So for example, in November, there's something at the Freshwater Institute, a recirculating aquaculture systems course that they do every year. So there are those types of trainings too for producers.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. I think we have gotten to nearly all the questions, so thank you so much. And I guess if there are other questions that people have, is it okay for them to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, this is great. Well, let me close then with thanking Nicole again for her willingness to talk to us today about everything Ohio aquaculture. This was really great. Thank you, Nicole. I did also want to remind everyone that the survey URL for this webinar is in the chat feature. So if you could take a few minutes to fill that out, that would be fantastic. This webinar series is sponsored by Ohio Sea Grant and will continue in November with Ohio Department of Natural Resources Zach Slagle, who will be talking about smallmouth bass in Lake Erie. The registration link is in the chat. Again, thank you, Nicole. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about aquaculture. Also, all the participants on this webinar, thank you for attending. We hope this was beneficial and we hope that you'll join us again in an upcoming webinar. Thank you all and have a great afternoon. Thanks again, Nicole. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.